Well, there's what she looks like all stripped down. Now I can box the inside of my frame and get my shocks all set up. So it's gonna move along pretty quick now. Okay, here's what I did for my brake lines. I got my upper brake line mount. So that mount right there would have mounted right here on the frame. I moved it right here, just to the right and a little further up than my shock mount. That seems to clear everything. I had to put a hose clamp on right here to kind of keep that line in place. So there's where that ended up. As far as my mount on top of my knuckle here, so it originally came up, kind of faced out like that. So I just bent this bracket. Here's the stock mount that I cut off and welded to the end of that. It's angled in a little bit to make everything work. Probably didn't need to angle it in as much. It's gonna have to be angled in a little bit, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you do yours and you put your tire on, you can kind of see how the angle keeps it away from the airbag. I could have probably angled it a little bit less, which would put less of a strain on this hose here, but it's done now, so I'm gonna keep it that way on mine. It's kind of what it looks like from measurements. Okay, so that explains that. That gives me plenty of travel through the entire suspension. Dude, this was a pain in the butt trying to figure out up and down and right and left, just trying to get everything to fit and get my hose to where it didn't hit the tires. And where I have it set up now, I have plenty of clearance everywhere, nothing binds. And that was a pain. The other thing too, so I put these gussets mainly because I just didn't know how much stress those airbags were gonna put on this upper mount. And I have about, I would say 3/4 of my weight on the front is on my airbag, so I wanted to make this pretty stout. Well, this upper gusset, I ran it all the way in. So here's the edge of my frame, and then here's my cross member here. I ran this front one on the right side a little too far in. Probably would have stopped it, I don't know, within about an inch of that engine cross member. And of course, you don't see these issues until after you're done. Here is my positive cable that goes to my starter. It originally ran right here, right on top of the frame. So I had to cut my upper support back a little bit so everything cleared back there with my positive cable. So that's kind of what I ended up doing. You can see that hose clamp there holding it. And then over here on the second mount, I'll just make a straight bracket to hold the second hose clamp, probably be 1.5 inches. And then my positive cable is gonna clear everything. Okay, here's the brake lines on the other side. Basically everything's in the exact same spot. Right to left, it all works the same. Here is my Mesa brake lines. So this kind of sat in the same spot on the other side stock. It sat right about here somewhere. You can reuse all of your factory brake lines. You got to kind of bend these lines around a little bit to make everything clear. But I was able to do that without having to, I didn't even have to take any of my brake lines off. So you can reuse your stock lines. You're just gonna have to be careful and kind of hand bend them around a little bit. Same on the other side where it goes down under the frame and then comes back up on the right side. You gotta kind of force it around, but it all works. all the front brake lines are all in the stock, or all of the front brake lines are all stock brake lines, which that's how I wanted to build the system. That way, if anything breaks or tears or whatever gets old, I can just replace it with the stock stuff. Moving on to the steering. So this is a big question I got because I was able to extend my steering a little bit. So I'm gonna show you where my bump stops ended up. Ugh. So here's your bump stop. And I'll clean all this up. I just had to put something there to test everything. So my original bump stop came out about an inch. Get that to focus. So with extending my pitman arm, I was able to suck in my bump stop about 1/4 of an inch. And so that gave me that additional steering. I did have to, right here where the knuckle would come and hit the frame, I had to grind that out, I would say about 1/16 of an inch. Otherwise it was hitting here before my bump stop was actually stopping it. So I ground that out about 1/16 of an inch. I had to take this down, gosh, not much, maybe 1/32 of an inch to clear the bottom of my bolt so it actually stops in the correct spot. So there's that, and we'll move on to the pitman arm. Okay, there is my straight pitman arm that I replaced my factory one with. This is what gives me the longer steering radius. Okay, that pitman arm off of Summit Racing, the part number PFN-PA700. Or you can also just search it as the part number PA700, Paul Apple 700. It's a longer pitman arm and it's flat. I needed the flat one to raise up my steering. So here's the stock one. Darn grease, come on, really, seriously? God. So, you know, this is horrible to do by yourself. Okay, try to get it. Okay, after trying to hold this stupid thing by myself and line it all up, okay, there's the stock one. You can see that extended one came out to about 3/4 of an inch longer where I ended up mounting it. It just depends on your setup and how you're gonna do it. But as you can see there, I did mine right about 3/4 of an inch longer. You can make yours as long as you want. This does not come pre-drilled. So when you do your setup, it's kind of a pain in the butt because you got to line everything up and take a gazillion measurements. But anyways, long story short, mine, I was a touch more to the passenger side on my hole. And the reason why I had to do that, so this is just a universal spline. Okay, how do I want to explain this? A universal spline for a GM gearbox, meaning it doesn't have a centering spot on it, so you can put this at any angle you want, right? But the teeth on this are like cocked one tooth too far, I want to say, to the driver's side, right? So I had to make up that difference when I drilled my hole. That way my steering was lined up perfectly straight. I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to explain here. So when you set everything up, you got to get your steering wheel straight, your wheels straight. You got to kind of hold all this stuff up and really eyeball where you want your center hole to be, which on mine was a touch more to my passenger side. Yours could be a little bit different, so don't go based on what I'm telling you here. You know, you're just gonna have to hold it up and really take your time. Because this stupid thing was like, I forget, like $130 or something like that. So I really didn't want to mess it up. So that's how I got my longer steering. Okay, here's one more super important thing. I wish I would have put it in my front end build, but with everything I did on this, I missed it. Okay, so this axle obviously used to sit here. These springs are kind of at a slight angle. So when you move your axle from the bottom to the top, it actually pushes your axle back. I clearly didn't think about this when I first built it and put it all together. So all this stuff, I drilled my holes to line up with my bolt that goes through my springs here in the center, like they all normally go. So by centering my axle in the lower mounts, my axle was actually too close to my fenders and it looked funny. Everything cleared for the most part as far as turning, but it looked funny because the tires sat too far back. So I had to take my axle and I had to move it forward on my springs about 7/8 of an inch. You'll have to set yours up to make sure 7/8 of an inch matches your setup, you know, due to however much flex you got in your springs. You know, these springs are probably sagged over the years, so new springs to old springs are probably going to set in a slightly different position. So set it on there and figure out where you want to drill your hole. So you got your lower mount, you got your spacer, and then you got your bottom mount for your leaf spring. All of these holes have to line up. And I want to say on mine, since I put this big 3/4 inch spacer, I'm 99% sure that I only had to drill into my lower mount. But if you have a smaller spacer, or for whatever reason you don't go with this big spacer, you'll have to put your hole here, you know, because you got the top of your centering bolt on your springs, you got the head on the top, and then you got the nut on the bottom. And then here's what it looks like on the bottom to better explain that. So there's my center hole that I originally started out with, and then there is my centering bolt for my leaf springs. And you can see the hole is towards the back of the truck. So this is kind of a mind warp on you. So if the hole being towards the back, that means I moved my axle forward. So here you can see where my axle is centered in between my U-bolts. And here is the original centering mount on the leaf springs. So you can see the axle is forward 7/8 of an inch on my leaf springs. Okay, here's the biggest dilemma I ran into, and this is kind of why I did the bags over leaf springs. Here in the front, you just don't have any room. So here's my back spring mount. When this thing's totally lowered, I'm only about 3 3/4 of an inch off the ground right here. So there's really no room to add a 4-link in here. And even if I cut up into my frame for my upper mount, my 4-link, the problem I run into, I still have to have a panhard bar in there and a sway bar in there. So I couldn't put my 4-link back in here, and there wasn't really any room to do like a 3-link setup. I shouldn't say there isn't any room, but I couldn't really figure out how to fit it in there. So the only other thing that I think a guy could try, and I might do it if I ever build another one of these, I would do like a ladder bar setup where I would do this as a solid bar that comes down the bottom, ties into the bottom of my axle there, and I'm still gonna be able to, so this is in the lifted position, right? So when it's fully dropped, get it where you can see it here. My panhard bar bracket only sits about 1/2 inch off my spring. So this whole area is kind of just ate up. But a solid ladder bar would probably work pretty good. You know, because you could keep your mount back there, you could run your bar to the bottom here, and you're still gonna be able to clear all this, and then you could do a full bag system, which would almost make more sense, because then I can set my drop height at just absolute perfection where my tires are sitting right on my fenders. Where my setup, I'm about 1/2 inch off my fenders, which I have to have that just because of how everything worked, you know. I couldn't drop it anymore because the further you drop it, the further you take all this stuff and get it closer to the darn ground. So, I mean, it is what it is. Plus, I don't know if I could have done that or not. You can probably play with your spacing in this area by another, 1/4 of an inch to make everything clear. If you just have bags on a ladder bar and you're just slamming everything. So there was the dilemma I ran into with doing the leaves, or the bags over the leaves. All right, well, we're down to the final little bit on this drop kit. So I got to do one little thing. I ran into, I wouldn't say it's an issue, because I was thinking I was gonna have to do it anyways. But when I test drove it, everything drove great. No vibrations, no funny feels. It was perfect. But when I did the burnout, just for fun, which is kind of a good thing I did it, I had a slight vibration, and you could definitely tell it was a driveline issue. Very, very slight. Well, when I set this truck up, you know, not thinking, just doing the normal thing, you know, you set your pinion angle, you make sure that pinion angle is the same as your transmission angle. That way everything kind of lines up parallel to one another. I just had a complete brain fart there. And when I checked everything with the sitting down in the driving position, my pinion angle matched my transmission angle perfect. I mean, within 1/2 degree. Good enough. Well, I didn't think about the fact that I have 3 drive shafts on this thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you the drive shafts and kind of explain what I'm gonna do, and we'll get to it. Okay, so here's what my drive lines look like. I got one shaft there, got another drive shaft there, and then there's another one up underneath the cab. So here was where my brain fart kind of happened, with setting up my pinion angle. So when you have multiple drive shafts, what I should have done is check my pinion angle at the back of this second drive shaft. So think about it. If I only had one drive shaft like on a car, this would actually be my transmission here. So I'd want to set my pinion angle back there to match that angle. Another thing you see when you have multiple drive shafts, they do this a lot on RVs that have vibrations. And I don't think it's the right way to do it, but it's probably the only way you can do it on something like that. So what they'll do is they'll actually string line all their drive shafts, and they'll make them to where they're level with one another. And usually you end up extending or lifting this center drive shaft up to where everything lines up. The problem you run into there is, well, now your U-joints, they're all level with one another. You know, so that's not the greatest thing for a U-joint. You're supposed to have at least a 1 degree difference from one drive shaft to the other. That way that U-joint is able to turn just a little bit, and it greases the needle bearings. So, and this is just, I'm sure you guys have done it. You get to building something and you start overthinking it, and you go down the rabbit hole of the forums to make sure you're doing everything right. And that's what I did. Stupid me. So I double checked everything. I read all the forums, watched some YouTubes, and it's right where I thought it needed to be. Your angles of your drive shaft need to be 1 to 3 degrees from each other. Okay, well, it might be hard to see here, but there is a pretty drastic drop in that center drive shaft. Plus, that rear axle is over here to the passenger side a little bit. So that center drive shaft, not only does it drop, but it's angled over. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have plenty of degree change in all this stuff. So I check all my drive lines. They are all exactly 1 degree off from one another. So if I raise that, then I end up having a straight center drive shaft, and it makes my angles almost zeroed from there to there. So, you know, I might have premature wear on the U-joints. So then I go back. This is so stupid. So then I go back, I check that angle to my pinion angle. I'm about 2.5 degrees off. So I need to shim my axle, my rear axle, down 2 degrees. Okay, I can't see this when I was underneath the truck. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it in the video, but it is plain as day that my rear pinion, it just looks off. It's angled up too high, so obviously it has to come down. I mean, this is just, standing here looking at it, it's totally obvious. So then I called my buddy up. This guy's like a freak of a mechanic. He's fixed everything from tractors to race cars to regular cars. And I'm like, hey, I want to double check this with you. Should I match my pinion angle to my center drive shaft? He's like, oh, yeah, you lowered that truck 7 inches, didn't you? He goes, go ahead and shim it 2 to 3 degrees. So I did all this work, all this research. I probably got 3 hours in figuring out the exact perfect degree. So my math came up to 2.5 degrees is what I need to go ahead and friggin' shim this axle. I call him, and in like 2 seconds, he's like, oh yeah, you gotta do it exactly 2 to 3 degrees, and it's gonna be just perfect with 7-inch lift, or 7-inch drop. Oh my gosh. I should have just called you the first time and been done with this, but let's get to it. All right, the last little bit on this lowering kit is finally done. So here's what I did on the back. I ended up, so I had to put something here to give my airbag support because my frame stops right about here. So there's really nothing that was holding it from doing this. I mean, in the front we were good because we had our 5th wheel plate, but in the back it was just kind of open frame. And I was gonna kind of make something out of 1/4-inch plate and make it look all cool. Dude, this is underneath the flatbed. No one's gonna see it. So I did opt for the easier route. I just took some 2.5 by 2.5 by 1/4 square tubing to brace everything up. And then I just did some 2 by 2 by 1/4 to tie it all together. And then that's kind of how I boxed it in. And right here on both sides where my shocks go, I did bend my plate in to clear the shocks. So let's go around to the front side and I'll show you the shock on the other side. So I kind of wanted to keep my shocks in the stock location because having one face back and one face forward helps with axle wrap. And this thing needs all the help it can get for axle wrap since I only have half the amount of springs on it. So that's why I stayed with this kind of shock setup. I did have to notch into my fifth wheel plate. That way my shock was at a 30-degree angle. I didn't want to go any more than 30 degrees. And the shocks were just off a 96 Ford F350 two-wheel drive. And then the top mount, same thing. They're just off a 96 Ford. I was able to buy the shocks and the top mounts off of Amazon for, gosh, I think like 120 bucks, took care of all that stuff. So that's where I notched into my fifth wheel plate. You're not gonna be able to see it, but I do have a piece of C-channel inside that notch. Plus I put another piece on top here to kind of give it a little bit more support. So she's done. Everything works. Now let's get this thing painted.